In 1932, in a small southern town in the United States, amid the sweltering heat of summer, a black baby was born. His cries echoed through a rickety wooden shack with a leaky roof and cracked earthen floor. His frail mother held him to her chest, her eyes filled with both love and trembling fear. His father, hands hardened and smelling of resin from the lumber mill, stood silent, gazing at the child as though looking at a fragment of an uncertain future. From that very moment, society had already determined his fate. Black meant inferior, meant obedient, meant living a lifetime beneath the heavy shadow of Jim Crow. His childhood held no toys, no full meals. Dinner was often no more than a crust of stale bread and thin soup. His mother worked as a maid for wealthy white families, enduring daily scolding and humiliation without daring to fight back. His father labored at the lumber mill, returning home with bloodied, calloused hands. Yet in that impoverished home, at least there were lullabies. Each night, his mother sang mournful black spirituals, songs born from the depths of slavery's history, carrying the sighs of millions once in chains. The outside world was never kind to a black child. On his first day of school, he wore his cleanest old shirt and clutched his only tattered notebook. His heart raced, his eyes shone with excitement. But as soon as he reached the school gate, a supervisor blocked his path. The man pointed to a wooden sign nailed above the entrance, "Whites only." "Get out of here, boy." His voice was as cold as steel. The boy froze. From inside came the laughter of white children, ringing like bells of privilege. That laughter cut into him, sharp as knives. His small hands trembled as they gripped the notebook tighter, his heart sinking. At that moment, a scar carved itself deep into his soul, a scar he would never erase. That night, in their dark wooden shack, his mother held him close and whispered, "You must endure, if you want to survive." But he lifted his tearful eyes and asked, "What's the point of surviving, if I can't learn, if I can't dream?" His mother stiffened. She fell silent. Because in that world, even dreaming was a crime for a black child. Day after day, he followed her to work at the grand mansion of a white family. The polished floors gleamed, the glass windows sparkled. White children studied in their private library, with brand new desks and shelves overflowing with books. Peeking through the crack of the door, he saw them reading, listening to lessons, laughing in happiness. That was paradise, one he would never be allowed to enter. When his gaze lingered too long, the white master glared. "Don't stand there staring. Go mop the floor. You people were born to serve, not to learn." The boy lowered his head, gripping the mop with shaking hands, but inside him, a flame of defiance flickered. In the evenings, he ran to the garbage dump behind the school. There, amid the stench and filth, he scavenged for crumpled newspapers, torn notebooks, broken pencils. Trash to others, treasure to him. He smoothed out the pages, tracing each word aloud. Some words were strange, but each letter was like a tiny star, lighting up his darkness. At night, in the dim shack, he used charcoal to scrawl on rotting planks, freedom. Justice. Each word was a hammer strike against the invisible walls around him. One evening, his father came home and found him writing by the light of an oil lamp. Alarmed, he snapped, "Don't let them see you. They'll kill you." The boy looked up, eyes blazing. His father stopped short. With a hoarse sigh, he muttered, "You must be stronger than me. You must learn to break these chains." The years dragged on, heavy with humiliation. Once, a gang of white teenagers caught him reading a newspaper by the roadside. They tore it apart, scattered the shreds, and one spat in his face. Savage. An asterisk 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 RS should swing hose, not hold books. Their laughter rang out harsh and cruel. The boy silently picked up the scraps, hands trembling, tears falling, not from fear, but from pain. That night, he wrote on the wooden planks, knowledge, power, and swore, if even a ragged newspaper frightens them, then I will study until no one can ever tear knowledge from me again. At 13, he saw his best friend Joshua beaten simply for walking past a white schoolyard. Teachers looked away. Joshua collapsed in blood, and the boy held him, sobbing. That night, he vowed, if knowledge is power, they want us weak so they can keep us down forever. At 15, the police arrested him just for reading a history book by the roadside. Who gave you the right to read this? They sneered. No one gave it. I gave myself that right, he answered. The slap came hard. The book fell, crushed beneath their boots. He was thrown into jail for a week, no charges, no papers. In the damp cell, he recited the words he had learned. Each sentence, each phrase, was like blood running through his veins. When he was finally released, his body was bruised, his frame thinner, but his eyes shone brighter than ever. That night, he wrote, "Freedom. Knowledge." And he swore, "I will learn. Even if it kills me, I will learn. And one day, I will write so the whole world will see this truth." In the darkness of a childhood marred by beatings, scorn, and deprivation, a seed had been planted. That seed was called knowledge. And it would grow, one day, into a mighty tree. At 13 or 14, white children were free to dream. But for him, those years were marked by fear. Walking down the street, he always felt eyes clinging to him like invisible nooses. For a white child, running was play. For a black child, running meant suspicion of theft. For a white child, staring at a house was innocent curiosity. For a black child, it was plotting to steal. For a white child, holding a book meant intelligence. For him, it meant rebellion. He grew up like a hunted animal. Once, while carrying water, a policeman stopped him, sneering. "What good are you, boy?" He didn't wait for an answer. He just spat on the ground. The boy bit his lip, lowered his head, and walked on. Inside, endurance sat like a stone on his chest, heavy, suffocating. Yet within that suffocation, a faint light flickered. That light was named Sarah. Sarah lived in the same neighborhood, his age, with sorrowful dark eyes. But in those eyes, there was always a gentle gleam. Sarah often slipped him scraps of bread, or broken pencils salvaged from the trash bins behind the white school. "You'll need this more than me," she would say with a smile that hid her own weariness. They often sat by the riverbank, where twilight painted the water in shades of violet. One evening, Sarah asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" He stayed silent for a long time. Then replied, "A scholar. To write what they don't want to hear." Sarah smiled, though tears shimmered in her eyes. "If you dare to dream like that, they'll never forgive you." He took her small, warm hand in his. "I don't dream for myself. I dream for all of us." Their love was both sweet and painful. They knew any moment it could be stolen away. In this society, even the love between two black youths wasn't recognized as love. It was merely existence, and existence itself was treated as a crime. Then one morning, he made a mistake. The mistake of an ordinary human being. He smiled. He was walking down the main street when a white girl glanced at him in surprise. Reflexively, instinctively, he smiled back. Just one smile. But in this world, that was a death sentence. A group of white boys nearby saw it. One stormed over, furious. "Did you just smile at her?" Before he could answer, a fist struck his face. Blood streamed from his nose as the world spun. They shouted and laughed while kicking him. "Now you'll learn what it means to touch a white woman, with your eyes." Passers-by watched in silence. No one stepped in. As he collapsed to the ground, one thought seared through him. If even a smile is considered a crime, then knowledge must become my weapon. That night, Sarah came to him, eyes swollen with tears. Her hands trembled as she touched his bruises. "They'll kill you," she whispered. He held her hand. "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only afraid of dying before I've written, before I've proven that knowledge has no color." Sarah broke down, sobbing. "You must live. Not just for yourself, but for all of us." Those words branded themselves into his heart. They weren't comfort. They were a command, a calling. By 17, after countless beatings, humiliations, arrests, and prohibitions, he was no longer a child. A vow burned fiercely within him. Sitting beneath the flicker of an oil lamp, he wrote in his battered notebook, "I will write. Write so that black children will no longer be driven from schools. Write so that my mother's tears are not in vain. Write so that Sarah will know our love does not die. Write so that knowledge becomes freedom." The lamp flickered, wind howled through the cracks, but he did not tremble. In that shabby shack, a silent warrior was born. His weapon was not a knife, not a gun. His weapon was words. And so his adolescence came to a close. A youth without carefree laughter, without playgrounds, without classrooms. Only darkness, blood, tears, and love. Yet within that darkness, a blazing fire had been lit, the fire of a future scholar, one who would wield knowledge to shake the very foundations of injustice. 18 years old. An age meant for great dreams. But for him, it was the age of leaving home, carrying with him a childhood scarred and battered. On his shoulder was a torn cloth bag, holding nothing more than an old shirt, a few scraps of dry bread, and some worn-out books. His only possessions. His father stood silently, calloused hands clenched tight. His mother wept, her gaunt face etched with new lines of grief. And Sarah, the only girl who ever softened his heart, gripped his hand until the very last moment. "You'll come back, won't you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I will," he answered, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "But not empty-handed. I'll come back with knowledge." The freight train pulled away from the station. The flicker of the oil lamp in their small shack grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the night. He knew then, there was no turning back. Wandering through the South, he took whatever work he could to survive, hauling loads, sweeping floors, carrying bricks. By day, sweat poured from his body. By night, under street lamps or the eaves of abandoned churches, he opened his books. The torn pages shivered in the wind, but his eyes burned with determination. Everywhere he went, white eyes cut into him like blades. Once, while reading at a train station, a white man snatched the book from his hands and flung it onto the tracks. A and asterisk 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 are playing the teacher, ha, the man spat, before walking off. No one helped him retrieve it. Only the wind moved, carrying the cruel silence away. Another time, working at a brickyard, the boss whipped him simply for lifting his head as the man walked past. Blood welled on his back, the lashes etched deep into his skin. But still, the light in his eyes never dimmed. In his heart, a vow whispered, "They can break my bones, but they will never break my mind." At 22, tragedy struck. News came that Sarah had fallen ill. He rushed back to town. In a cramped room, Sarah lay on a bed, frail and breathless. Her eyes still glowed, but her voice was as fragile as a thread. "Have you kept your promise?" she asked, her lips trembling. He clasped her thin, dry hand. "I've studied, Sarah. Every single day. And I will write. I swear it." A faint smile flickered across her lips, weak, trembling, but serene. "Then, I can rest." That night, Sarah was gone. The gentle flame that had carried him forward was extinguished in the dark. He sat by her side until dawn, eyes dry, no tears left to shed. Inside, an endless void opened. Sarah was not just love. She was proof that life could be worth living. Her death pierced his heart like a blade. But instead of destroying him, it forged an unbreakable vow: "I will write. I will live, for both of us." After the funeral, he left town once again. This time, there was no Sarah waiting at the station. Only the wind swept through the eaves, bitter and cold. In those bleak days, an unexpected light appeared. A black professor, who had once heard him speak at a small gathering, sought him out. Looking straight into his blazing eyes, the man said, "You're not just someone hungry for learning. You are destined to be a scholar. And your knowledge will save millions." For the first time, someone believed in him. For the first time, a door cracked open. That night, beneath the glow of an oil lamp, he wrote in a fresh notebook, "I have lost Sarah, but I have not lost my purpose. From this tragedy, I will rise. One day, I will become a torch that lights the way." And the flame inside him roared higher than ever before. Tragedy had not destroyed him. It had forged him into steel. At 26, he lived in a cramped boarding room, walls damp and stained, ceiling dripping with water. On an old wooden table lay scattered scraps of paper, stubby pencils, and a few books borrowed from the library for black readers. Night after night, he wrote relentlessly. Outside, the wind howled through cracks in the door, rain hammered the tin roof, but inside that room, every word he put down was like a blade stabbing into lies. He wrote about a childhood denied at the school gates. He wrote about Joshua, beaten unconscious simply for walking past a playground. He wrote about Sarah, the girl who had left this world before she could see their dream come true. Some nights, ink smeared with tears. But he did not stop. Silence, to him, meant betraying every wound he had ever witnessed. At 30, he finished his first book. The title, Locked Doors. In it, he wrote, "They built doors, schools, churches, parks, and hung signs that read whites only. But the truth is, they built doors inside our minds, turning us into the mute and the deaf. Knowledge cannot be locked away. It will always find a crack to escape through." The book was born quietly, but it spread quickly. Among the black community, it was passed hand to hand like a secret flame. People read it, wept, and rose stronger. White newspapers raged, branding him a troublemaker, an agitator. But to black people, he became a fire of knowledge. Invitations came for him to speak at black churches and schools. On rickety wooden pulpits, he stood tall, his voice ringing out. Knowledge has no color. Justice cannot take sides. Equality is not a favor, it is a human right. Each time he spoke, hundreds of eyes lit up. Some elders wept. Some young men clenched their fists. Some children, for the first time, believed they might one day sit in classrooms unbarred by chains. But light always draws shadows. Police began to keep watch. One night, white paint smeared across his door spelled, "Go back to the field." Another time, as he lectured, a window shattered and a rock flew in. Still, he did not stop. Smiling, he held up his book. If they must throw stones to silence us, it means our words have reached their deepest fear. At 35, he was arrested again. The charge, inciting social unrest. In the interrogation room, a white inspector shouted, "Who do you think you are? A black man daring to write books, daring to teach people to defy the law?" He looked him in the eye, calm and steady. "I do not defy the law. I defy lies. It is your law that is the crime." The slap split his lip, blood spilling. But he did not groan. He knew, if he broke here, Sarah would die a second death, Joshua would die a second death, and every sacrifice would be erased again. A week later, he was released under pressure from the community. In the moment he walked free, he did not stay silent. He wrote again. He spoke again. He turned truth once more into a spear, striking at the heart of darkness. By 40, his name echoed far and wide. Locked Doors had been reprinted many times, becoming a handbook for black youth. His words were quoted in protests, in sermons, in the songs of resistance. He stood on a platform before thousands, his voice carrying, "Jim Crow's justice is not blind. Its eyes are wide open, seeing only color. But we will force justice to close its eyes, so that it may first see humanity. And that day will come." Thunderous applause erupted. In the eyes of many, he was no longer just a scholar. He was a torch. A torch that lit the way forward, and one that made his enemies tremble. At 41, he was no longer just a scholar writing in a dim boarding room. He had become the voice of a generation. Locked Doors spread across the South like wildfire. In churches, in small diners, in secret gatherings, people passed its pages from hand to hand, reading through tears, then rising with eyes ablaze. White people called him a troublemaker. Black people called him a torch. One night, he stood in a rickety wooden church as rain pounded outside. Inside, hundreds of people crowded shoulder to shoulder, their eyes filled with hunger and hope. He raised his book high, his voice rolling like thunder. They locked the doors of schools, but still we learned. They forbade us to dream, but still we dreamed. And now they tremble, because those dreams have turned into fire. Applause erupted, drowning out the rain hammering the roof. The civil rights movement was rising, and he was one of its leaders. From big cities to poor villages, he was invited to speak. But with light came shadow. At an outdoor rally, as he spoke, a stone flew straight into his forehead. Blood streamed down his face. The crowd screamed. But he did not falter. He stood tall, rain mixing with blood, his voice thundering. You may throw stones at me, but you cannot throw stones at the truth. You may strike me down, but you cannot strike down the yearning for freedom in millions of souls. A photograph of him standing in the storm, blood streaked across his face, was captured, printed, and spread through black communities. That image became a symbol. But fame also made him a target. One late night, he returned to his rented home. The window was shattered. On his table lay a charred wooden cross, the mark of the Ku Klux Klan. He stared at it, eyes cold. His mother had once told him, "You must endure to survive." But now he understood, if he bowed his head, not only he, but an entire generation would be crushed. The next day, in the town square, he held the burnt cross high before hundreds of people. This is not a symbol of faith. This is a symbol of fear. And fear will never triumph over truth. The crowd roared. Many times, he witnessed young men and women in the movement beaten, arrested, even killed. Each death was a knife to his heart. But he knew justice was never free. During one march, police knocked him down with fire hoses. He rolled across the asphalt, but crawled back up, holding his book aloft. They may steal our breath, but they will never steal our voice. That moment, captured in photographs, spread like sacred fire. Many later said it was the moment they realized justice could only be built with blood and courage. By 55, he had written more books, but more importantly, he had become a teacher to an entire generation. In small classrooms, he sat among circles of young activists, speaking slowly. Knowledge is a weapon. But do not use it for revenge. Use it for liberation. When we turn hatred into reason, only then are we truly free. Many young civil rights leaders quoted his words in their speeches, in their marches. Some said, without him, we would never have believed the dream could come true. Whenever he heard such words, he only smiled. In his heart, he remembered Sarah. He remembered her whisper long ago, "You must live. Not just for yourself, but for all of us." And he knew he had kept that promise. At 61, he was no longer the man of quick strides and unyielding strength. His back was bent, his steps slow, his hair white as snow. But his eyes, those eyes still burned, like a flame that had never gone out. The same eyes that had once shone in a dark shack, blazed in a damp prison cell, and burned defiantly on the podium beneath a storm of stones. He lived in a small house, surrounded by books, manuscripts, and letters from young people. Because of you, I dared to go to school. Because of you, I believe I am worthy. Each letter was proof that the scars of his life had not been in vain. At night, he would sit by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the ground. Memories returned. The day he was turned away at the school gate. The day Joshua collapsed under fists. The day Sarah left, whispering, "You must live." The day he was arrested simply for holding a book. Each moment replayed in his mind like fragments of a slow-motion film, etched forever in memory. One day, he was invited to speak at a prestigious university, a place that once, had he dared step foot in, might have cost him his life. When he walked onto the stage, the entire hall rose to their feet in thunderous applause. White students, black students, brown students, all cheered as one. On the large screen behind him appeared the words, Knowledge has no color. His hands trembled as he held the microphone. His voice was hoarse, yet still firm. Long ago, they locked the school gates in my face. But they did not lock my mind. They drowned us in darkness. But they did not extinguish our flame. And today, you sit here, of every color, as proof that justice can take root, even in barren soil. Tears streamed down the faces of many students. In him, they saw not just an aging scholar, but living proof that hope could triumph over oppression. Yet glory could not erase pain. In his dreams, he still saw Sarah. He still heard his mother's cries. He still saw his father collapsing in sweat and toil. He still saw children driven from schools, mothers clutching their little ones at the gates. He knew his legacy was not awards or honors. His legacy was a reminder that injustice endures, and if humanity forgets, history will repeat itself. At 72, he stood at the podium for the last time. His hands shook, his cane trembled, but his voice was steady. Justice does not come from pity. Justice only comes from struggle. And if we stop fighting, justice will vanish. The hall fell into silence, then erupted in thunderous applause. People would later say, the light in his eyes that day was like the light of a star on the verge of fading, but shining so brilliantly it burned into memory. A few years later, he passed away in his sleep. No pain. No cries. Only a long breath closing the chapter of a life spent in struggle. Thousands came to mourn. Black, white, brown, walking side by side, a living testament that the torch he lit had never gone out. On his gravestone was carved the single line he had once scrawled in charcoal on a scrap of wood so many years before. Knowledge has no color.